We're staring down the barrel of the 2026 midterms. And let me tell you, the stakes could not be higher. Right now in Washington, D.C., Republicans are trying to ram through the Save America Act through Congress, a piece of legislation masquerading as election security that election experts warn could purge millions of legally eligible voters from the rolls and fundamentally dismantle our democratic processes. States across the United States, Republican states, have decided to redistrict their congressional maps in response to Donald Trump's request. They're shutting down the Department of Homeland Security, forcing TSA agents to work without pay and leaning into the most toxic, divisive culture wars imaginable just to score cheap points on cable news. If you want to know how we fight back against the kind of national dysfunction, you don't look to Washington, you look to the states. 36. That is the exact number of governor's mansions up for grabs this year. Right now, the map is incredibly tight. Republicans control 26 governorships nationwide, while Democrats hold 24. The people who win these 36 races won't just be fixing potholes. They'll be the ultimate firewall for voting rights, reproductive freedom, and economic justice in this country. But out of all 36 races, there's one state, one specific race that is absolutely rewriting the American history books, and that is Alabama. With Republican Governor Kay Ivey term limited and heading for the exits, the governor's mansion in Montgomery is wide open. And we are setting up for a political heavyweight rematch of epic proportions. In 2017, a civil rights prosecutor named Doug Jones, the prosecutor who finally brought one of the killers of the four African-American girls slain in the 1963 16th Street Baptist Church bombing to justice, did the impossible. He defied political gravity, broke a decades-long Republican stronghold, and turned deep red Alabama blue to win a seat in the United States Senate. He fought for health care. He fought for working families, and he proved that the Deep South wasn't a lost cause. But then came 2020, a brutal partisan snapback, and Jones lost his seat to a man who had never held public office, former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville. Now in 2026, the universe is giving us a second act. Doug Jones is running for governor of Alabama. Tommy Tuberville is also running for governor of Alabama for the Republican nomination. If both win their respective primaries, it will be the first time in the history of the United States that two directly elected senators from the same state face off against each other for a governorship. This isn't just an election. This is a battle for the soul of the South. Alabama faces a fateful choice this year between a leader who governs for all citizens or a politician who only governs for the loyal few, to keep the partisan divide as wide as possible in a state where healthcare hangs by a thread and the Save America Act threatens to empower state-level voter suppression. The governor's seat is the most crucial line of defense for millions of Alabamans. My guest tonight, of course, prosecuted the Ku Klux Klan. He defined the odds in the United States Senate, and now he's stepping back into the arena to do the impossible once again. Thank you for being a part of the Political Mic, former Senator Doug Jones.
Mike, it's great to be with you again. It's good to see you.
Thank you, sir. And Senator, let's kick this off by talking about the absolute sleeping giant in American politics right now, the youth vote. If we look to the national numbers, 2020 broke modern records with 50% of young people turning out to vote. In the 2022 midterms, we saw the typical drop off down to around 27%. But in 2024, that number roared back to 47%. But here's the statistic that should frankly be keeping Alabama Republicans awake at night. Going into the 2024 election, youth voter registration for 18 and 19-year-olds in the state of Alabama spiked by a staggering 53 percentage points compared to 2020. So these young voters are not tuning into cable news to get outraged about whatever culture war the right wing is selling this week. Every major poll from Tufts to Yale shows they are completely laser focused on survival. They care about the cost of living, housing affordability, reproductive freedom, and the literal preservation of democracy. So here's my question. In a 2026 midterm environment where youth turnout historically drops off a cliff, how do you take that 53 percentage point surge of young voters, newly registered Alabama voters, completely cut through the right-wing noise machine and convince them that Doug Jones is the guy who is actually going to make their lives tangibly better?
Well, Mike, it's a great question, and it's one that we are working really hard to try to make sure that we answer in the right way to get those voters out. I think you kind of in your setup kind of answered the question itself. And that is, you go at them with issues on issues that they care about. You know, right now, this is not a great time to be a young person getting into your career. You're one of those folks getting into your career. The war is raging in the Middle East. You've got AI threatening to take jobs. You've got affordability issues everywhere and growing with the war, with gas prices and all. It's a tough time. But I think that what we're going to offer is answers as best we can as a governor, and hopefully others that might get elected statewide with me. And the answers are going to be, you know, a governor can't control prices as much as like the Fed and the president with trade policies and that sort of thing. We have to kind of react. So we want to make sure that we open up markets for folks, but at the same time, one of the things we can do is make life a little bit more affordable with their electricity bills. We can do the things necessary to get wages up, to make sure that we've got good wages. Alabama follows the federal minimum wage at $7.25. A few years ago, the legislature passed a bill prohibiting cities from raising the wage after Birmingham tried to raise the wage to $10.25. So as governor, I want to try to get back to a place where we can raise that minimum wage either statewide, which will be, quite frankly, a tough sell, or allow cities to do that. I mean, the mayors and county commissioners are on the front line for this. So I think part of your answer is that we just go straight at these young folks to talk to them about the issues that they care about. The other piece of this that we're emphasizing is that we've got a historic opportunity in Alabama to completely change the direction of the state. This is the first time in a long time that Democrats have fielded a candidate in all 7 constitutional offices. We've got good, credible candidates going. We're all offering the alternatives. We're offering choices that really haven't been seen in Alabama in a long time. And I'm hoping that the young folks will take notice of this, because this is about their future more than it is my future. This is not about me getting elected governor. It's about their future. And that's the message that we've got to I think, relay and get across at colleges, universities, to some of those young folks that are in the job market, that are scared of AI. We've got to make sure they have affordable housing, that they can afford their electricity bills, they can afford their groceries. We can get them good wages. So I think getting that group together, I think we're going to see a really significant increase in the young voter population coming out to vote this time, for the very reasons that you taught. They're more laser focused, they're concerned, but in the addition here, I think they will see a historic opportunity for change in Alabama in a way that they want to see change. And we've got to make sure that they know the best way to do that is to get out and vote.
Now, Governor, we've seen recent redistricting efforts on the state level since Donald Trump personally called the governor of Texas and said that he was entitled to more votes. And Texas, unlike the governor of Texas, unlike the Secretary of State of Georgia, who was also pressured when Donald Trump called him to ask for 11,780 votes, said, yes, sir, let me get right on it. And all of a sudden, you have state after state, whether it's Mississippi. Fortunately, the Indiana Republicans did not comply with that request. But let's talk about the Save America Act that the United States Senate is currently wrestling with right now, your former colleagues. And this, of course, is a Republican-backed legislative measure backed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has chosen to place his full political weight behind this particular piece of legislation. And I would note, it's noteworthy that he did not put his full political weight behind a border bill or an immigration reform bill, but he placed his political weight behind this piece of legislation. And this legislation, of course, is pushing for proof of citizenship requirements that election experts warn is the most restrictive voting bill, would make this the most restrictive voting bill ever, and could block over 21 million eligible Americans from the ballot box. As a former federal prosecutor who has literally fought for civil rights in the courtroom, when you look at this bill, do you see a genuine election security measure, or is this just the newest chapter in the old playbook of voter suppression?
This doesn't have a damn thing to do with election security. There is nothing about this that has anything to do with election security. Every study, every investigation, everything that has been done has indicated there is virtually no election fraud, and that includes the number of folks who are undocumented and that are ineligible to vote who actually cast a ballot. There are ample things in place already, including criminal violations, that to stop that. You know, in Alabama, our Secretary of State did this big thing about he was purging all the folks off the rolls. And I think he got just a few thousand over the course of like the last 20 years or so. I mean, it was some ridiculous number. And of that ridiculous number, there was an even more ridiculous number that was, you could count on one hand, of the number of people without documentation that actually tried to vote or did vote. It is a solution in search of a problem. And it's absolutely absurd what they're trying to do. It will create havoc for people who do not have birth certificates, that can't find their birth certificates, can't go to the courthouse and buy one or get one very easily. They may have been born in another state. It is going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult for women who are married and whose driver's license may be different than their birth certificate, the name that they go by, their married name. It is just another way to try to suppress vote. As you said, it is another chapter in the same old playbook with folks that do not have the wherewithal to kind of compete for those votes. And so they just want to keep people from going to the polls. We got the same thing going on in Alabama right now, where Republicans are they're going to close the primaries so that independents, some 300,000 independent voters, will have no say so in taxpayer funded primaries. They are doing other things they're not even going to bring to a vote a bill that would allow early in-person voting. So I think the Republican leadership has decided that they just don't care about trying to put forth proposals that the public can compete for for votes. They just want to suppress the votes that they assume they're not going to get.
And I'm glad you put it that way, because Republicans keep framing this as voter ID. But Democrats put forward a bill under President Joe Biden that would have addressed voter ID, the Freedom to Vote Act, and Republicans voted against it. And so to me, if I was running for an office for the Senate of the United States House of Representatives, I would just read off the list of Republicans who voted against this voter ID bill a few short years ago. This whole narrative, that Democrats are not for voter ID is false. What this would do is create a modern day poll tax, because if, like you said, former senator, if folks do not have a birth certificate, if folks do not have a passport, then they have to now find the funds to obtain those documents just to be able to cast a vote. And that, of course, would place a financial barrier in the way of a constitutionally protected right.
Yes. Look, this bill hopefully will die a death in the U.S. Senate. I think that there are enough Republicans that will stop it, that will stop and not go as far, and let me put this way, as changing the filibuster rules. It's a little ironic, Mike, just to be honest. It's ironic that when the Freedom to Vote Act that you were talking about, which I was all in favor of, it was a great bill. It was really a very well thought out bill that would help get people to the polls. When that bill was up, only Democrats voted for it. And there was efforts to try to change the filibuster then, but 2 Democratic U.S. senators refused. And they said, nope, we're not going to do that, because the tide will turn and there will be folks on the other side. Now you've got Democrats blocking any effort to change the filibuster, and the same Republicans who voted against it the last time are now pushing for it. It's as we say down here in the South, it's just a question of whose ox is getting gored. and right now hopefully there's going to be enough Republicans who hold off and not vote to change any rules, and that the SAVE Act will die a very, very slow death.
Now, Senator Jones, your likely opponent in the governor's race, Tommy Tuberville, the current senator, just defended a social media post linking New York's Muslim mayor, Zohran Mamdani, to the 9/11 September attacks in 2001, literally captioning it, and he captioned it, "The enemy is inside the gates." He's out there making inflammatory statements that Islamists are the enemy, while simultaneously opposing Affordable Care Act subsidies that hardworking Alabama families rely on. How do you take on a politician who seems more focused on out-of-state culture war, fear-mongering, and beat him on the ground in a state that just wants its hospitals open and its roads paved?
I think you have to stand up and speak out. Number one, we're not going to take the bait on all of the crazy stuff that Tommy Tuberville does. If we did, our head would explode. There's so much of it. I mean, he is off the charts with his ability to sink to new lows. Okay. And the whole anti-Muslim, as the anti-Islamophobia, whatever you want to put on it, I just call it vile racist attacks. That's what I said on my social media. I made it in a statement. It's horrible what he's done. And the folks that he's attacking are Americans. They are folks who are American citizens. We have a number of mosques. We have our population is not a huge population, but it's about the same as the American population, which is a little over 1%, I think, something along those lines. But, you go at this. I think the people in Alabama, we've seen this playbook before, Mike. We saw it with Bull Connor and George Wallace and all of the Jim Crow legislation and all of the Jim Crow and dog whistle rhetoric. It has never turned out well for Alabama. We are still trying to recover from the reputational harm from Wallace and Connor and the fire hoses and dogs and that sort of thing. People remember those things for a long, long time. And so I am hoping that the more people hear him and the things that he says, the more they're going to reject that. They're going to reject the divisive language. They're going to reject the hateful rhetoric, and they're going to do what we call a crowded table. There's a song by the Highwomen called Crowded Table. We want to build a house with a crowded table where there's room by the fire for everyone. That's what the focus of our campaign and my vision for Alabama.
And of course, Tuberville also voted in favor of the Big Beautiful Bill. There's a very specific quantifiable cost to putting partisan political theater ahead of your own constituents. And Tommy Tuberville also went to Washington, and he decided to put a blanket hold on hundreds of our top military promotions, jeopardizing military readiness just to fight a culture war. And what happened? The Pentagon was paralyzed as a result, and President Biden ultimately decided that the United States Space Command was not going to be in Huntsville, Alabama, but was going to stay in Colorado. Tuberville traded Alabama jobs for a right-wing headline. It cost your state billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. So how do you go to Huntsville, one of the proudest military towns in America? There was actually a report that actually showed Huntsville as one of the top cities to live in for young people. And how do you explain to those voters that the man asking to be their next governor literally cost them the Space Command headquarters just so he can get a booking on cable news, and voted for the bill that is going to strip folks of being able to go to a rural hospital and shut down hospices?
Yeah, we have been putting that message out there. President Trump has now done the right thing by moving Space Command back to Huntsville. I'd always believed, I argued for it. I talked about it at every Armed Services Committee hearing I was on, because I've always thought it should have been there. But I've also told the folks in Huntsville, both privately as well as a lot of publicly, that when you've got a United States senator pulling those kind of shenanigans and truly jeopardizing national security and disrupting family members of service members all across the world, not just a few generals, but all of those that were waiting on promotions behind those generals, those families, and those career folks that were waiting for that advancement. When you jeopardize security like that, it's hard to see where a commander in chief would say that may be the last place. It is hard to see a commander in chief not saying that that's maybe not the best place. We had other issues with abortion laws and those kind of things. Ultimately, it cost Alabama about 4 or 5 years of Space Command delay. And that's a lot of money. Fortunately, there's so much in Huntsville that's going good. We'll pick up the slack. But I think I need to remind folks up there that when I left the United States Senate in January of 2021, Space Command was supposed to go to Huntsville, Alabama, and it got delayed because of Senator Tuberville. So he can't take credit for bringing back something that he was the biggest part of it leaving.
And of course, former Senator, before I let you go, HBCUs, of course, are not a side issue in Alabama. They're the central part of the state's educational, economic, and cultural future. Under President Biden, HBCUs received sustained federal attention and targeted investments, but under President Trump, these schools were too often treated as an afterthought, even as they carried the burden of educating generations of Black students with fewer resources than they deserve. So what does the record really show about HBCU funding under Biden versus under Trump? And why should Alabama voters trust Democrats more than Republicans to protect and grow these institutions going forward?
Well, let me qualify it a little bit, because under President Trump's first term, he still didn't, as a practical matter, care about the HBCUs. He did some interesting photo ops with HBCU president, but he really didn't do very much. His budgets didn't talk about HBCUs or give them any increased funding. But thanks to the work that I did with Senator Lamar Alexander from Tennessee, Patty Murray from Washington, we got permanent HBCU funding and the first increases in funding in about 10 to 15 years. I can't remember the exact number. So that was done in the first Trump term. It was not his work. It was our work, mainly from the Senate, that carried over into the House. And fortunately, that kind of funding stayed through with the Biden administration. This time, everything is getting cut. DOGE went after literally everything. And under the guise of affirmative action, getting rid of affirmative action programs and DEI and wokeness and all those other stupid catchphrases that the far right uses and Donald Trump uses, a lot of those programs are being cut. And I think funding is some, I won't say in jeopardy, but it's being cut. And I think that these HBCUs are looking every way possible to expand their student population to try to get more monies coming in. You know, we've got, I think, more HBCUs than any state in the country. Like there's like 14. Very proud of the work that they do. I'm looking forward to being governor, to get back there with them, to help them get the funding, to do all of the things necessarily, because they provide such an incredible educational service and opportunity for the people of this state.
And I'm old enough to remember in 2022, a lot of folks complaining about gas prices under President Biden. Of course, that was the aftershock of COVID-19. But now the same folks that put "I did that" stickers with Biden's face on it are now talking about short-term pain for long-term gain. And they're singing from the same hymn book, so discipline-like. And for a lot of Alabama families, foreign policy stops being abstract the second it hits the gas pump. So if this country continues to get deeper and deeper into this Iran war quagmire, we're talking about folks having to spend more money. I mean, I'm thinking over $5 by the time we get to Memorial Day weekend, just to be able to fill the gas tank. So what do you say to Alabamians who look at the possibility of another prolonged Middle East war and think Washington may call it strategy, but I'm the one who's going to pay for it?
Well, I want them to think about who they're going to vote for the next time. This is not what a lot of people in Alabama, in fact, I would say almost all the people in Alabama, whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, you didn't vote for this. You did not vote for a war that you can't get out of, that is not well thought out, not well planned. The reaction from the and it just ignored history. By the way, just completely ignored history and some very strategic things that anybody that has followed the Middle East and the tensions in the Middle East would have known. That's number one. Number two, it is not just this war that is going to cause gas prices to go up. Farmers are already hurting because they've lost markets because of the tariffs. The increase in tariffs, we don't know what the Supreme Court decision, what the after effect is going to be on that. But I don't think much of that money that is due in refunds will trickle down to consumers. So you still got such instability in the economic market around the globe and in Alabama, and the gas prices are only going to make it more difficult. There's no question. I was traveling a fair amount in the car this weekend and today, and prices now are at least $1 more than what I was paying for just a month ago. And I agree with you. I think it's only going to rise for a period of time. It does not look like we're going to get out of this anytime soon. And I think people in Alabama now are going to, I think they've begun to connect the dots between, wait a minute, what I was told when I was voting is just the opposite of what I'm seeing happening right now. And it's not by accident. It's affirmative action that the Trump administration is doing that is taking just the opposite position than what they campaigned on. And people remember that. This is not just politics as usual. People remember that. And let me say too, Mike, I know we're running out of time here. I think the whole chaos and anti-democracy mode that you're seeing out of this administration is also taking its toll on the public. I don't think they bargained for ICE agents in masks, just murdering people on the streets of Minnesota, ripping folks out of daycare and out of their cars, and many of them American citizens, and they're just randomly doing some of this. I think that the attack on institutions of government, even to the point of what Donald Trump is doing by demolishing the West Wing and putting his name on the Kennedy Center, now he may put it on a damn coin or something like that. I think people are just put up with that. It's time, for them to, I think that they're going to make their voices heard through the ballot box this coming November.
And that's the fight, not just a fight for one office, not just a fight between two men, two political parties with two different visions, two different resumes, two different records, and two different visions of public service. This is a fight over what Alabama is going to be in this moment when democracy itself feels strained, when working people are getting squeezed, when hospitals are closing, when voting rights are under assault, and when too many politicians would rather feed outrage than solve problems. Doug Jones has never been a spectator to history. He stepped into the fire before. He took on one of the ugliest chapters in Alabama's past and forced justice out of a system that has delayed it for far too long. He stepped onto the political battlefield in 2017 and shocked the country. And now he's back asking Alabamans to believe once again that courage, competence, and conscience still matter. Thank you so much, former Senator Doug Jones, for what you brought to the table. Thank you so much. And this was a very insightful conversation. We wish you all the best on the campaign trail.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's good to see you. I look forward to seeing you in Alabama soon.
All right, sir. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Hi, it's Mike Taylor, the host of the Political Mike podcast. If you like what you heard tonight, I want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to ask you to please follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Amazon Music. You can also follow along and keep up with the conversation through our Telegram channel. Follow us on Twitter at @ThePollyMike, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much, and no matter what part of the political spectrum that you fall on, I want to encourage you to stay engaged, stay a part of the conversation, and stay informed. Thank you.